Let's go to Washington for more on the American perspective and bring in CTV's Richard Madan. Richard, the takeaways from what you heard the president say today.
Yeah, we have a couple headlines coming out of it, but I was just looking at the Russian stock market. It looks like since these sanctions were imposed by the Western nations, the Russian stock market's down well over 30%, wiping out billions of dollars. The ruble is at its lowest level yet. So these sanctions by the international community are having some impact, an immediate impact, at least with the Russian markets, but just the long term or the medium term is yet to be seen as this tragic story unfolds. But a few headlines out today. One from President Biden. He was asked at the very end of his speech by a reporter, well, why not sanction President Putin directly now? And he said that's still on the table, but not today, which implies that there are more packages of more severe sanctions. And this is just the opening salvo, day one. A couple other headlines coming out from President Biden's address. Really, he had three audiences. He had the domestic American audience. He had to play the role as President of the United States, basically leading this effort along with Western allies to comfort Ukraine and to target Russia. Third, of course, is direct messages to Vladimir Putin and the Russians, saying, opening that Putin chose this war and now he must pay the consequences, calling this a premeditated attack. As for the sanctions, the banks that the United States and allies have imposed sanctions on, the Russian banks, Biden says that's valued at around $1 trillion in assets. That's big money. There is another step that Biden could take, and that would be to detach Russia from this international banking system called SWIFT, which is an acronym. He was asked why he didn't do that. He said, not yet, because Europe didn't want to go down that road, which is another signal that when you're imposing these sanctions, they have to be coordinated. And when you're dealing with 30 NATO allies, agreement and negotiations can be kind of tough. But that clearly is another tool in the toolbox. If Russia is detached from the SWIFT banking system, that would mean that Russian oligarchs will not have access to money held by international banks. And that goes right down to Visa and MasterCard that can get detached from the banking system. So that could be yet another powerful tool that Western allies have not yet implemented yet. Biden's saying that European countries are not ready to activate that at this time. A few other really interesting comments from Biden as he was speaking to his domestic audience, saying that, look, these sanctions and this conflict between Russia and Ukraine could impact energy prices here at home in the U.S. Biden reiterating he's going to tap into strategic reserves to keep gas prices down and energy prices low, which would be somewhat of a curb on inflation that we're already seeing here in the U.S. And finally, just moments ago, the Pentagon announcing 7,000 more U.S. troops will be deployed to Europe in countries surrounding Ukraine. So tensions are escalating. The U.S., Western allies working together, and that was a key message that Biden was getting across, not just to the domestic audience, but to the global audience, that NATO nations and the United States, Western allies are united. They're having a united front, but the big question is just how long the West can stay united against Russia, and that is clearly a calculation Vladimir Putin thought about before invading Ukraine.
Richard, do you think there'll be criticism that this was not tough enough from President Biden in terms of what he had to say?
For sure there are. We're already seeing it from some Republicans saying, you know what, Putin has already invaded. What are you waiting for? Implement these toughest SWIFT sanctions. But again, I think it goes back to a little bit of nuance if you read between the lines with what President Biden said. And indeed, some Canadian cabinet ministers, when they had their press conference earlier this afternoon, they were asked the same questions. Why not throw this out there now? I think there's two ways to read into it. Number one, you have 30 NATO partners. Getting all 30 countries to agree is going to be fairly difficult, because each region, each country, particularly the European countries, have their own concerns and their own domestic issues that they have to deal with. They're closer to Europe than North America is. Number two, perhaps you hit the Russians with some sanctions, and then as the pain of these sanctions continue, you slap in more sanctions. Why President Biden did not slap sanctions directly on Vladimir Putin when he was asked, and he sidestepped that question, saying not today, that is a clue that perhaps these tougher sanctions are going to come down the road.
One other question, Richard. You talked about those 7,000 troops. I mean, the United States continues to be very clear there will be no American boots on the ground, so to speak, in Ukraine. Ukraine is militarily, anyway, on the ground, largely on its own.
Right. Well, as Biden has said, if American troops are on Ukraine soil and they start fighting with Russian soldiers, that's basically the start of the Third World War. Nobody wants to get involved in that catastrophic scenario. So that is why American troops are not going to be on the ground in Ukraine. But what we are seeing is American troops, as I said, 7,000 being deployed throughout Europe today. There will be in NATO countries, whether it's Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, all countries surrounding Ukraine as a show of force, as a united front against Russian aggression. But the moment that the U.S. steps foot into Ukraine, or the moment Russian troops start shooting at NATO allies, NATO countries, then that is a whole new worrying ballgame, because that's when Article 5 kicks in. An attack against one NATO country is an attack against all of them. Ukraine is not officially a NATO country, but they are a strategic partner with Western allies. And that's why you will not see at this point NATO troops from NATO countries in Ukraine. But clearly, we're at a dangerous moment that at this point, that could be a very troubling scenario if that does happen.
CTV's Richard Madan in Washington. Thanks for this, Richard. Appreciate it.